A 4-year-old homeless girl finds a multimillionaire being tortured by a Mexican cartel. But before they land a lethal blow, she appears behind them and does something shocking. Comment and rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The sun was setting over the sprawling metropolis when muffled screams pierced the silence of the abandoned industrial district. The 4-year-old girl, who looked barely 2 due to her extreme frailty, wandered the dusty streets, scavenging for scraps of food in the overflowing dumpsters. Her bare feet trod carefully amongst the broken glass and debris that littered the cracked asphalt. For 6 months, since her elderly grandmother had passed away, she had roamed the city streets alone. Her tangled hair hung over her dirty face, and her tattered clothes barely covered her skeletal little body. Hunger was a constant companion, as was the fear that made her hide whenever she heard approaching footsteps. That grey afternoon, something different caught her attention. Raised voices echoed from inside a half-destroyed warehouse, located in an area where hardly anyone ventured. The childish curiosity spoke louder than her survival instincts, and she approached slowly, her steps as silent as a wounded cat. Peeking through a crack in the rusted metal wall, her big eyes widened in horror. In the center of the dark warehouse, a man was tied to a metal chair. Even in the dim light, she could see that he was young, maybe in his 30s, with features reminiscent of the heartthrobs she saw in the old magazines scattered around the streets. His expensive suit was torn and stained with blood. 3 hooded men surrounded him, their rough voices echoing through the empty space. The tallest one held something that glinted in the meager light filtering through the broken windows. Their words reached the girl's ears as a jumbled mess, but the threatening tone was unmistakable. The tied-up man held his head high, even with his face swollen and bruised. There was something in his posture that impressed the little observer, a dignity that not even that terrible situation could break. He did not beg. He did not cry. He merely watched his captors with an expression of silent defiance. The girl's heart beat so hard that she feared the bad men could hear it. She had never witnessed anything like it, but her street smarts told her that the handsome man was in mortal danger. She wanted to flee, to run far away from that haunted place, but something kept her there, glued to the cold wall of the warehouse. Then, the tallest man gestured to the other 2. They positioned themselves beside the chair, and the girl realized that something terrible was about to happen. Without thinking of the consequences, she tried to move to get a better view, but her bare foot bumped into an old paint can that someone had abandoned there. The sound of metal hitting concrete echoed through the warehouse like thunder. The 3 men turned instantly towards the sound, their bodies tense as cornered animals. For a few seconds that seemed eternal. The silence was total. "Cops!" shouted one of the kidnappers, his voice filled with panic. In a matter of seconds, they abandoned everything and ran in different directions, their dark figures disappearing into the darkness that was beginning to engulf the city. The girl remained motionless, glued to the wall, her heart pounding so hard that she could feel it in her throat. When silence returned, she heard the voice of the tied-up man, weak but still firm. "Please, if anyone is there, help me." The child hesitated. All her life experience on the streets told her to run, not to get involved, to remain invisible. But there was something in that man's voice that touched a part of her heart that she thought had died along with her grandmother. Slowly, she approached the entrance of the warehouse. The man raised his head when he saw her, and their eyes met. For a long moment they observed each other, the multi-millionaire businessman and the homeless girl, 2 completely different worlds, united by a moment of fate. "You're hurt," were the first words she managed to whisper, her voice hoarse from so long without using it. He smiled, despite the pain, a smile that lit up his bruised face in a way she would never forget. With trembling fingers, The girl began to untie the thick ropes that bound the man's wrists to the metal chair. Her small hands, calloused by the hard life on the streets, worked with surprising determination for someone so young. With each knot she untied, she could feel his relief growing. "What's your name?" asked the businessman, watching that fragile little creature who had appeared like an angel in his darkest hour. She paused for a moment, as if she had forgotten that she possessed a name. "It doesn't matter," she murmured finally, returning to work on the ropes. "People on the streets just call me Little One." When she finally managed to free him, the man massaged his injured wrists and tried to stand up. His shaky legs almost made him fall, but he leaned against the wall to regain his balance. He looked at the girl, who now maintained a respectful distance, ready to flee if necessary. He hesitated, realizing that revealing his identity could be dangerous. "You can call me friend, and you just saved my life." The girl lowered her eyes, clearly uncomfortable with praise. "I just made noise. It was an accident." "But you were the one who came to help me when they ran away. You could have left." They walked out of the abandoned warehouse together, he limping slightly and she walking beside him like a silent shadow. Night had completely fallen on the metropolis, and the distant lights of the buildings created a cruel contrast with that decadent area where few ventured. "Where do you live?" he asked, watching how she constantly looked over her shoulder, as if expecting the kidnappers to return at any moment. "Nowhere. Everywhere." She shrugged, as if not having a home was the most natural thing in the world. "It depends on where I can hide when it gets dark." The businessman stopped walking. The reality of those words hit him like a punch in the stomach. There was a 4-year-old child, alone in the world, sleeping on the streets of one of the most dangerous cities in the country, and she had risked her own safety to save him. "How long have you been living like this?" "Since my grandma went to heaven, she said I had to be strong, that one day someone would take care of me." The girl instinctively touched a small necklace of colorful beads that hung from her thin neck. It was hers. He knelt down to the child's height, ignoring the pain in his bruised ribs. "What if I said that day has arrived, that I want to take care of you?" The girl's eyes widened, a mixture of hope and distrust dancing in her dark pupils. "People always say things they don't really mean. I'm not like those people." He reached out his hand to her. "Trust me." After a long moment of hesitation, she touched his hand with the tip of her fingers, as if testing whether he was real. His skin was warm, solid, different from the ghosts of kindness she had found on the streets. The ride to the mansion was done in silence. He had called a cab, and throughout the journey, the girl remained huddled on the seat, watching the city lights through the window that she had never seen from inside a car. Her eyes reflected a mixture of fascination and terror at that new world that was opening up before her. When they arrived at the imposing gate of the property, she held his hand more tightly. The mansion rose before them like a palace from the fairy tales that her grandmother used to invent, with perfectly manicured gardens and windows that shone with golden light. "Is this where you live?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "This is where we are going to live," he corrected gently. The interior of the house was even more impressive. Soft carpets covered marble floors, valuable paintings decorated the walls, and the crystal chandelier in the entrance hall created a spectacle of lights that made the girl raise her face in admiration. She had never imagined that such places existed. A middle-aged woman, dressed in an impeccable uniform, appeared on the stairs. Her expression of surprise quickly turned to concern when she saw the state of her boss. "Sir, what happened? Should we call a doctor?" "I'm fine, Mrs. Gable. I just need some care." He placed his hand protectively on the girl's shoulder. "And we need to prepare a room for our new resident." The housekeeper looked at the dirty and ragged child with an expression that mixed compassion and bewilderment. "Of course, sir. I'll arrange everything immediately." While Mrs. Gable went upstairs to prepare the room, the businessman led the girl to the spacious kitchen. She sat on a chair that seemed gigantic for her diminutive size, observing every detail around her with wide eyes. "When was the last time you ate a real meal?" he asked, opening the refrigerator. She thought for a long moment, as if it were difficult to remember. "My grandma used to make soup. It had little pieces of potato and sometimes even meat." He prepared a simple sandwich, but his hands trembled slightly. The trauma of the kidnapping was still fresh, and every sound in the house made him jump. When he handed the plate to the girl, she held his hand for a moment. "You're scared too," she observed with a wisdom that did not match her age. "A little," he admitted, impressed with the child's perception. "My grandma used to say that when two scared people are together, they get less scared." At that moment, something broke inside the businessman's chest. This fragile girl, who had lost everything and lived in the most terrible conditions imaginable, was trying to comfort him. It was as if a small ray of light had entered his dark life. But then the sound of firm footsteps echoed through the hallway, and an elegant woman of about 25 appeared at the entrance to the kitchen. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, even though it was late at night, and her expensive dress contrasted with her icy expression. "Dear brother," she said, her sweet voice masking something darker, "I heard you brought company home." The blonde woman entered the kitchen with calculated steps, her high heels echoing on the marble floor like small hammer blows. Her blue eyes scanned the girl from head to toe, analyzing every detail of the ragged child who was sitting at her family's table. "So it's true," she murmured, crossing her arms over her chest. "You really brought a street urchin into our house." The businessman instinctively positioned himself between his sister and the girl, like a protective shield. "She saved my life today, and now it's my responsibility to take care of her." The younger sister laughed, a cold sound that did not reach her eyes. "Always the same romantic idealist. First you marry that penniless secretary, now you bring beggars home. When are you going to learn that sentimentality doesn't mix with business? My wife was not just any secretary, and this child is not just any beggar." His voice carried a firmness that made the girl look at him with admiration. "She's part of the family now." The woman approached the table, feigning maternal interest. "And what's your name, dear?" The girl shrank in the chair, her survival instincts alerting her to danger. I don't have an important name." "Of course you do." The businessman knelt down next to the chair. "Everyone has an important name. Can you tell me yours?" After a long moment of hesitation, she whispered so softly that they almost couldn't hear. But when the name came out of her lips, it was as if she was handing over the last precious thing she possessed. The sister smiled, but there was something predatory in that expression. "What an interesting name. Well, dear, I'm sure you must be tired. How about we go see your new room?" The businessman noticed how the girl clung to the edge of the table when his sister approached. "Actually, I'm going to show her the room myself." "Nonsense. You're injured and need medical attention. Let me take care of the domestic details." She reached out to the child. "Come on, little one. Let's see where you're going to sleep." The girl looked at the businessman, her eyes pleading not to be left alone with that woman. He perceived the child's fear and felt a pang of guilt for not being able to protect her at that moment. "It's okay," he said gently to the girl, "but I'll be right here when you come back." Reluctantly, the child got off the chair and followed the blonde woman up the marble stairs. Each step seemed like a mountain to her short legs, and she had to lean on the ornate railing to avoid tripping. The room prepared by Mrs. Gable was bigger than any place where the girl had ever slept. A four-poster bed dominated the center, covered in soft white sheets that looked like clouds. New toys were scattered around the room, and a large window offered a view of the illuminated gardens. "Pretty, isn't it?" said the sister, closing the door behind them. "Of course it won't last long." The girl turned around, confused. What do you mean?" The woman approached, her voice low and venomous. "Let me be clear with you, little creature. My brother is going through a difficult time, and your presence here is just a phase. Soon he'll realize that a dirty beggar has no place in a family like ours." "He said I could stay," the girl whispered, her hands trembling. "He says a lot of things when he's emotional. But I've been running this family's business for years, and I know how things really work." She knelt down to the child's height, her face too close. "If you're smart, you'll leave on your own before I have to take more drastic measures." The girl backed up until she touched the wall, her heart beating so hard that she could hear it in her ears. "I didn't do anything wrong. Your existence here is wrong. You don't belong in this world." The woman stood up, smoothing her dress. "But don't worry. I'll give you some time to get used to the idea." When the door closed, the girl let herself slide down the wall until she sat on the cold floor. The luxurious room suddenly seemed like a gilded prison, and she felt more alone than she had ever felt on the streets. Downstairs, the businessman paced back and forth in the living room, his mind swarming with unanswered questions. Who were those men who kidnapped him? How did they know his routine? And more importantly, were they planning to come back? His tech company had grown exponentially in recent years, turning him into one of the richest men in the region. His investments in stocks and Bitcoin had multiplied his wealth impressively, making his fortune reach figures that he himself sometimes didn't believe. But all that wealth had also made him a target. The phone rang, cutting through his dark thoughts. It was an unknown number. "Thought you'd gotten rid of us?" The distorted voice on the other end of the line made his blood run cold. "This was just the first attempt. Next time, no street child will be able to save you." The call was cut off before he could answer. His hands trembled as he put away the phone, and he realized that the nightmare was far from over. Worse, now there was an innocent child in his house, potentially in danger because of him. He ran up the stairs, ignoring the pain in his bruised ribs. He needed to check if the girl was okay, if his sister hadn't said anything to scare her. When he reached the room, he found the door ajar. The girl was huddled in the corner, away from the comfortable bed, hugging her knees to her chest. Her eyes were red, but she was not crying. She had learned on the streets that tears were a dangerous luxury. "Hey," he said softly, entering the room. "Why aren't you in bed?" "The floor is more like what I know," she lied, not wanting to tell him about the conversation with his sister. He sat on the floor next to her, his expensive clothes coming into contact with the cold floor. "You know, when I was little and had nightmares, my mom always said that monsters couldn't enter rooms where there was real love." "And did it work?" "Always." He smiled gently. "And this room is full of love now that you're here." The girl looked at him with her big, wise eyes. "What if the real monsters come? Not the ones from dreams, but the ones that hurt people?" The question caught him off guard. How could a 4-year-old child have so much perception about the real dangers of the world? "Then I'll protect you. I promise." "People always make promises," she murmured, resting her head against the wall. "My grandma promised she would never leave me alone. And she didn't. She taught you to be strong, gave you courage to help me today. In a way, she's still taking care of you." At that moment, his phone rang again. This time, it was his sister. "We need to talk early tomorrow about arrangements," she said, her voice strangely formal. "There are certain things that need to be resolved quickly." When he hung up, the girl was watching his face intently. "The pretty lady doesn't like me," she said simply. "Why do you say that?" "People who don't like me have a special way of looking. I learned to recognize it." She touched her grandmother's necklace. "She has the same look as those bad men in the warehouse." The morning arrived with a golden light that entered through the silk curtains of the room. But the girl had been awake for hours. She had spent the whole night on the floor, watching the shadows move across the walls, each noise in the house making her jump. The luxury around her seemed too unreal to be true, as if it were a dream from which she would awaken at any moment. Back to the cold streets. The businessman came down for breakfast with deep circles under his still swollen face. The night had been a succession of nightmares where he relived every moment of the kidnapping, every threat whispered by the hooded men. His hands trembled slightly as he held the coffee cup, and he had to concentrate to avoid spilling it. "Did you sleep well?" asked his sister, already sitting at the table with a pile of documents next to her plate. Her appearance was impeccable as always, but there was something different in her eyes, a hardness that he hadn't noticed before. "Not much. And the little one? I imagine it was a overwhelming experience for her." The woman smiled, but the expression didn't reach her eyes. "Speaking of which, we need to discuss some practical details about your new pupil." He was about to answer when the girl appeared at the entrance to the dining room. She was still wearing the same clothes as the night before, now even more wrinkled, and her hair was more tangled than before. She hesitated in the doorway, as if she wasn't sure if she could enter. "Good morning," he said with a genuine smile, gesturing for her to come closer. "Are you hungry?" The child nodded shyly and headed for the chair farthest from his sister. During breakfast, she ate slowly, as if each bite was too precious to be wasted. Her eyes moved constantly between the two adults, trying to decipher the unspoken tensions that filled the air. "Well," said the sister, pushing the documents towards the businessman, "as I was saying, there are legal issues that need to be resolved. Informal adoption is not recognized by law, and there are specific procedures that must be followed." He flipped through the papers, frowning. "This can wait. First, I want to make sure she's safe and comfortable. Actually, it can't wait." Her voice took on a firmer tone. "We have legal responsibilities now. And frankly, considering what happened yesterday, maybe it's not safe for her to be here." The girl stopped eating, her eyes widening. "Do I have to leave?" "Of course not," he said quickly, shooting a warning glance at his sister. "You're going to stay here as long as you want." But the sister continued, relentless. "The men who kidnapped you may come back, and if she's here, she could get hurt. Is it fair to expose a child to that risk?" The question hit the businessman's most vulnerable spot. He had spent the whole night struggling with exactly that dilemma. How could he protect the girl if he couldn't even protect himself? What if the kidnappers found out about her and used her as a weapon against him? "I can take care of myself," the girl said suddenly, her voice small but determined. "I know how to hide. I know where the bad men can't find me." His heart broke hearing those words. A 4-year-old child shouldn't have to know those things, shouldn't have developed survival strategies against predators. "You won't have to hide anymore," he promised, placing his hand gently on hers. "We're going to find a way to solve this." His sister got up from the table, taking the documents. "Well, while you decide about family arrangements, I have a company to run. By the way, some urgent emails arrived overnight. Apparently, our investors are worried about rumors of instability in leadership." "What kind of rumors?" "Nothing specific yet, but you know how the market reacts to uncertainty, especially when there are so many millions in stocks at stake." She paused at the door. "Maybe it would be better if you show up at the office today, show that you are in control of the situation." After she left, the businessman remained silent for a long moment, lost in thought. His company represented years of hard work, a financial empire he had built brick by brick. If rumors about his stability began to circulate, the value of his stock could plummet, taking with it the fortune that had taken a lifetime to accumulate. "You're worried," observed the girl, again demonstrating that frightening perception for her age. "A little. Work stuff. My grandma always said that when we have big problems, it's best to solve them one at a time." She tilted her head, studying his face. "Which is the most important problem?" The simplicity of the question surprised him. What was the most important problem? His safety? Her safety? The company? His family? Everything seemed interconnected in a way that he couldn't unravel. "I guess it's keeping you safe," he said finally. "Then don't worry about the other problems today, just me." They spent the rest of the morning exploring the mansion. He showed her the library with its high shelves full of books, the garden where peacocks roamed freely, and the swimming pool where the turquoise-blue water reflected the sky. With each new room, the girl's eyes widened a little more. But it was in his office that she paused the longest. The walls were covered with pictures that showed the evolution of his company, from a small startup to the multi-million-dollar corporation it was today. Charts showed the exponential growth of his net worth, and a screen displayed in real time the value of his investments in different markets. "You're very rich," she said, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. "Yes, I work with technology, and I've been lucky with some investments. My grandma said that money doesn't buy the most important things." She touched a framed photo on his desk, a young and beautiful woman with a radiant smile. "Who is she?" "She was my wife. She went to heaven 2 years ago." The girl nodded with sad wisdom. "That's why you were alone in the bad place yesterday." "What do you mean?" "People who have lost someone important sometimes go to dangerous places. My grandma said it was because they stopped caring about protecting themselves." The observation hit him like a lightning bolt. That was exactly what had happened. For the past 2 years, since the loss of his wife, he had become increasingly reckless, working late in dangerous areas of the city, ignoring basic safety precautions. It was as if a part of him wanted something bad to happen. But now, looking at that fragile child who depended on him, he felt something changing inside his chest. For the first time in 2 years, he had a real reason to protect himself, to care about his own well-being. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was his sister. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. "I need you to come to the office now. There have been developments." "What kind of developments?" "The kind that can't be discussed over the phone. And maybe it's better to leave your little protégé at home. This isn't child's play." When he hung up, the girl was watching his face intently. "Do you have to leave?" "For a little while. But Mrs. Gable will stay with you, and I'll be back soon." "What if the bad men come back while you're gone?" The simple question contained a terrible wisdom. If the kidnappers were really watching, his absence would be the perfect time to attack. But he couldn't ignore the problems at the company. Much of his wealth and stability depended on resolving the crisis that his sister had mentioned. "Nothing's going to happen to you," he promised, though he wasn't sure if he could keep that promise. "But if you get worried, or if anything strange happens, call me immediately." He wrote his number on a piece of paper and handed it to her. The girl held the paper as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. Before leaving, he gave Mrs. Gable specific instructions about not letting strangers into the house and keeping the doors locked. But as he drove to the office, a feeling of unease grew in his stomach. There was something in his sister's voice, an urgency that didn't seem related only to business problems. And at home, the girl positioned herself at the bedroom window, watching his car disappear through the gate. Her street smarts told her that something was wrong, very wrong. And for the first time since arriving at that dream home, she began to plan escape routes. The mirrored building of the company rose like a glass and steel tower in the financial center of the metropolis, reflecting the cloudy sky of this tense morning. The businessman parked underground and went straight to the top floor, where his executive office was located. Each step echoed through the silent corridors. It was too early for most employees, but his sister had insisted on the urgency of the meeting. She was waiting for him in the conference room, accompanied by 3 men in suits he didn't recognize. The table was covered with documents, open laptops, and graphs that showed sharp declines in various quotations. The atmosphere smelled of strong coffee and tension. "Finally," she said, without lifting her eyes from the papers, "Gentlemen, this is my brother, the CEO of the company. One of the men, the tallest, stood up and extended his hand. "Pleased to meet you. We're from the crisis management consulting firm. Your sister hired us due to the recent events." "What events?" The businessman felt a chill in his stomach. "What are you talking about?" His sister finally looked at him, and there was something strange in her expression, a mixture of concern and something he couldn't identify. "It seems that news about your kidnapping leaked to some investors. There are rumors that you're being blackmailed, that the company may be compromised." "That's impossible. No one knew about the kidnapping besides us." "Apparently, someone did." The second consultant opened a laptop and turned the screen towards him. "We received calls from 3 large investment funds this morning, all wanting to know about the stability of the leadership and the safety of their assets with us." The businessman examined the numbers on the screen, and his heart sank. The company's stock had fallen 15% at the opening of the Asian market. Millions of dollars of his net worth were simply evaporating as he sat there. How is this possible? Who could have leaked this information? The third consultant spoke for the first time. "That's an interesting question. Usually leaks like this come from within the organization itself, someone with access to privileged information." The businessman looked around the table, a terrible suspicion beginning to form in his mind. "How many people knew about what happened yesterday?" "Well, it was just the 2 of us initially," said his sister, drumming her fingers nervously on the table. "But you told Mrs. Gable, and there's the child. There's no way the girl could have told international investors," he said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "She barely knows what money is. Maybe not directly, but children talk, and people listen." The first consultant opened a folder. "Actually, we have some recommendations on how to deal with this vulnerability in your personal security." "What kind of recommendations?" His sister leaned forward. "They believe it would be better if you reduced your exposure to unpredictable elements, at least until the situation stabilizes." The businessman felt as if the ground were moving beneath his feet. "Are you suggesting that I abandon a 4-year-old child because of fluctuations in the market?" "We're suggesting that you prioritize the stability of a company that employs 300 families," said the second consultant. "A company that's worth hundreds of millions of dollars and sustains an entire economic ecosystem. Besides," added his sister, "the child would be better off in an environment that's more appropriate for her condition. There are specialized institutions that can take care of her properly." "Institutions." The word came out of his mouth like poison. "You want me to put a child who saved my life in an orphanage because that's better for the company's profits?" The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable. The 3 consultants exchanged glances, and his sister sighed dramatically. "It's not about profits, it's about responsibility. You have obligations to hundreds of people who depend on this company. And frankly, after everything you've been through, maybe this isn't the best time to make important emotional decisions." "Emotional decisions." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Saving a child is an emotional decision. Bringing a complete stranger into your home without a background check, without proper documentation, without considering the security implications, yes, that's emotional." At that moment, his phone rang. It was Mrs. Gable, and her voice was filled with concern. "Sir, the girl is very nervous. She said she saw a strange car parked outside the house 3 times this morning. Always the same car, always stopping in the same place." His blood ran cold. "Did you lock all the doors?" "Activate the security system." "Yes, sir. But the girl insists that she recognized one of the men in the car. She said it was one of the bad men from yesterday." He hung up the phone with trembling hands and looked at the faces around the table. Everyone seemed to be waiting for exactly that call. "Trouble at home?" asked his sister, but there was something in her voice that didn't sound like genuine concern. The kidnappers are watching my house, and you're here convincing me to abandon the only witness who can identify them." The first consultant spoke again. "Actually, this reinforces our point. Your house is no longer safe for anyone, especially for an innocent child," added the second. His sister stood up and walked to the window, looking at the city below. "I know it's hard, but sometimes we have to make difficult choices for the greater good. The child can be relocated to a safe place. You can focus on resolving this crisis, and everyone wins. Everyone except a 4-year-old girl who would lose the only family she has." "She survived on the streets for 6 months," said his sister, turning to face him. "She's tougher than you think." The coldness in those words hit him like a slap. How could his own sister talk so indifferently about the fate of a child? His phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number. "I see you're busy with important meetings," said the distorted voice of the kidnapper. "Meanwhile, your little savior is at home, so vulnerable. It would be a shame if something happened to her because of your stubbornness. If you touch a hair on her head..." "You what? Are you going to call the police? Are you going to tell someone?" "But who's going to believe you when they find out you're mentally unstable, making irrational decisions, risking an entire company because of a street urchin?" The call was cut off, and he realized that everyone in the room was watching his reaction. There was something in their looks, an expectation, as if they knew exactly what was happening. "I have to go home. Now." "Don't be rash," said his sister, blocking his path to the door. "If you run out of here now, it will only confirm to investors that you're not in control of the situation. The situation is that a child is in danger. The situation is that you're in danger, and you're dragging all of us down with you." Her voice took on a harder tone. "Maybe it's time to consider whether you're still fit to lead this company." The silence that followed was deafening. The 3 consultants avoided his gaze, and he realized that he had been set up. This meeting wasn't about crisis management. It was about removing him from power. "You planned this," he said slowly, the pieces falling into place in his mind. The leaks, the rumors, this meeting, it was all orchestrated. His sister sighed, as if she were dealing with a stubborn child. No one planned anything, but when someone starts making decisions that put an entire financial empire at risk, steps need to be taken. "And the girl? Is she part of your plan too?" "The child is a problem that needs to be resolved. The sooner the better for everyone involved." At that moment, he understood the true extent of the conspiracy. His own sister, the person he trusted most, was working against him. And now an innocent child was being used as a pawn in a power game she couldn't even comprehend. Without saying a word, he headed for the door. His sister tried to block him again. "Where do you think you're going?" "To protect my daughter," he said, and it was the first time he had used that word, "and to find out exactly who my real enemies are." The businessman drove like a madman through the streets of the metropolis, running yellow lights and ignoring angry honks from other drivers. His heart was beating so hard that he could feel it in his throat, and his hands were sweating so much that he needed to constantly wipe the steering wheel. At every traffic light, at every turn, he imagined terrible scenarios of what could be happening at his house. When he finally arrived at the mansion, everything seemed too normal. The gardens were impeccable, the peacocks walked calmly through the grass, and there were no visible signs of disturbance, but something in his instincts screamed that this normality was artificial, dangerous. He parked quickly and ran to the main door, his keys trembling in his hands as he tried to unlock the lock. Before he could completely turn the key, the door opened, revealing Mrs. Gable with an expression of relief mixed with concern. "Thank God you're back, sir. The girl is very scared." "Where is she? Did anything happen?" "She locked herself in the closet of the bedroom and refuses to come out. She says she saw the same car 3 times and that she recognized one of the men from yesterday." Mrs. Gable lowered her voice. "Sir, I saw the car too. a black sedan with dark windows. It was parked on the corner for almost an hour. He ran up the stairs 3 at a time, heading to the girls' room. The door was ajar, and he could hear a small, frightened voice coming from inside the closet. "Little one? It's me. I'm back." The sound ceased immediately, followed by some noises of movement. The closet door opened slowly, revealing the girl huddled between the coats, her big eyes wide with fear. "They came to get you," she whispered. "The bad men. They know where you live." He knelt in front of the closet, reaching out his arms to her. "Come here. You're safe now." She ran into his arms like a wounded bird seeking shelter. Her little body was trembling so much that he could feel every shiver. "I saw what they did to you yesterday. I don't want them to do it again." "They won't, I promise." But even as he said that, he knew it was a promise he might not be able to keep. They sat on the bed, and she snuggled against him as if she wanted to disappear inside his protection. They stood out there for a long time, and there was a blonde woman in the car too. His blood ran cold. "A blonde woman. Are you sure?" "She had hair like your sister's, but it was too far away to see her face." The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in his mind in a terrible way. His sister wasn't just trying to remove him from the company. She was actively working with the kidnappers. Everything had been orchestrated, the kidnapping, the accidental rescue, and now the pressure for him to abandon the only witness. "Listen," he said, holding the girl's face between his hands. "We're going to have to leave here. It's not safe anymore." "Where are we going?" "To a place where no one can find us. But first, I need to get some important things." He went down to his office and began to gather crucial documents, flash drives with backups of sensitive data, and cash that he kept in a hidden safe. As he worked, his mind quickly processed all the information from the past 2 days. His sister had gradually taken more control of the company over the past 2 years, especially after he began to isolate himself after the loss of his wife. She knew his routine, knew when he would be vulnerable, and had access to all the financial information of the company. The kidnapping hadn't been random, it had been an inside job. The house phone rang, cutting through his thoughts. It was his sister. "Where are you? You left the meeting so abruptly." "I'm taking care of my family," he said, his voice icy. "Your family? You mean the beggar?" There was clear contempt in her voice now, the mask of concern finally slipping. "You're being ridiculous, and you're putting all of us in danger with this stubbornness. The only person putting anyone in danger is you." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Oh, what do you mean by that?" "I think you know exactly what I mean. Be careful with accusations you can't prove, dear brother, especially when your mental stability is already being questioned." "My mental stability? You yourself said you've been having nightmares, anxiety attacks, and now you're making irrational decisions, seeing conspiracies where they don't exist." Her voice took on a tone of false compassion. "Maybe it's time to seek professional help." The call was cut off, and he realized that she was building a narrative where he was mentally unstable, incapable of leading the company or caring for a child. If she could prove that legally, she could take total control of his fortune. He finished gathering the documents and went upstairs again. The girl was waiting for him sitting on the bed, a small backpack next to her. Apparently she had gathered her few belongings. "I'm ready," she said simply. "We don't have much time. They could come back at any moment." They went downstairs together, but when they reached the main hall they found Mrs. Gable talking in a low voice with a woman he had never seen before. She was a lady in her 60s, dressed conservatively, with grey hair tied in a severe bun. "Oh, sir," said Mrs. Gable, looking uncomfortable. "This is Miss Huckleberry. She said your sister sent her to help with the child." The woman stepped forward with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Pleased to meet you. I'm a social worker specializing in emergency cases involving minors at risk." The girl hid behind his legs, her street smarts alerting her to danger. "I don't want to go with her," she whispered. "And you won't," he said firmly. No one authorized me to send a social worker. Actually, said the woman, taking some papers from her bag, your sister, as the legal administrator of the family's business, has the authority to make decisions in emergency cases, especially when there are concerns about the well-being of a child. What concerns? Well, a child without documentation, without a medical history, living in a house where there has recently been a violent incident. She paused dramatically. That raises questions about the suitability of the environment. He looked at Mrs. Gable, who avoided his gaze. Did you call my sister? She called me, sir. Said she was worried about everyone's safety and that she was sending professional help. The girl tugged at his shirt. That lady smells the same as the bad men, she whispered. Smells like cigarettes and something sour. He looked more closely at the supposed social worker and noticed details he had initially missed. Her nails were yellowed from nicotine. There was a dark stain on her wrist that appeared to be a poorly disguised tattoo, and her eyes had a hardness that didn't match someone who worked with children. I need to see your credentials, he said. Of course. She opened her bag again, but this time he saw something that made his blood run cold. For just a second between the papers, he glimpsed the handle of a syringe. Run, he shouted to the girl, pushing her towards the back door. The fake social worker moved with surprising speed for someone her age, blocking the path to the main exit. Mrs. Gable screamed in fright when she realized that something was terribly wrong. The girl ran towards the kitchen as he had ordered, but stopped at the door when she realized that there were two more people waiting there. A tall man she recognized from the warehouse, and another holding something that glinted in the light. Welcome to our little family reunion, said a familiar voice. His sister appeared at the entrance to the living room, accompanied by the 3 consultants from the morning meeting. They had all exchanged their expensive suits for dark, practical clothes. Surprised, dear brother? You've always been smart in business, but terrible at detecting when you were being manipulated. The girl ran back to him, and they stood in the center of the hall, surrounded on all sides. She gripped his hand tightly, and he could feel her little body trembling with fear. This isn't going to end well for you, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Too many people know where I am. Actually, they don't. You left an important meeting abruptly, clearly disturbed. Your housekeeper will testify that you were acting erratically, and unfortunately, mentally unstable people sometimes do desperate things. The girl looked up at him with her big, wise eyes. They're going to hurt you? Before he could answer, his sister continued. The child, of course, will go to a more suitable family, a family that understands the value of keeping secrets. You can't do this. Actually, we can, and we will. She signaled, and the men began to approach. I'm sorry it has come to this, but you've always been too stubborn for your own good. The circle of people closed around them like predators surrounding their prey. The businessman quickly calculated his options. They all seemed to end badly. His sister watched the scene with cold satisfaction, as if she were watching the final move of a chess game she had planned long ago. You know, she said, slowly walking around them, I really hoped you would be more reasonable, that you would understand that this is just business. Business? His voice was filled with disbelief. Kidnapping your own brother is business. Removing an unstable CEO who is making decisions that harm a multi-million-dollar company is business, yes. She stopped in front of the girl, who hid even further behind his legs. And eliminating inconvenient witnesses is just preventative maintenance. The fake social worker approached with the syringe in her hands. This will be quick and painless, for both of you. Wait, he said desperately, trying to buy time. At least explain to me why. Why now? Why like this? His sister sighed as if it were a tedious question. Because you became an obstacle. For 2 years after that wife of yours died, you were perfect, depressed, absent, letting me manage everything. I built contacts, established partnerships, expanded our investments in Bitcoin and other assets that you didn't even know existed. You were diverting money from the company. I was maximizing the company's potential. Your conservative investments in traditional stocks were yielding only a few million a year. My more creative operations multiplied our net worth 15 times. The girl discreetly tugged at his sleeve and whispered something so low that only he could hear. The kitchen window, 3 seconds when she looks at the paper. He glanced quickly at where the child had indicated. The kitchen window was partially open, and outside he could see the thick branch of the tree that his wife loved so much. It was a tiny chance, but it was the only chance they had. But then, continued his sister, you had to fall for your little street urchin and decide to start caring about life again. You started asking questions about the finances, questioning decisions. That couldn't continue, so you set up the kidnapping. I hired professionals to scare you, to make you back down. I didn't expect you to be so stubborn. She looked at the girl with disgust. And I certainly didn't expect a street child to ruin everything. One of the men became impatient. Can we finish this? The longer we delay, the more complicated it gets. You're right. His sister nodded to the fake social worker. You may proceed. It was at that moment that the girl did something completely unexpected. She stepped out from behind his legs and walked towards his sister, her small steps echoing in the silent hall. Please, pretty lady, she said with her sweetest and most innocent voice, don't hurt him. I'll go away if you want. His sister lowered her guard for an instant, surprised by the child's sudden cooperation. Finally, a little common sense. I just want to say goodbye to him properly, continued the girl, reaching out her arms as if she wanted a farewell hug. His sister bent down, and at that exact moment, the girl shouted, now! The businessman didn't hesitate. He scooped the girl into his arms and ran towards the kitchen, using the 3 seconds of confusion to reach the window. Behind them, angry shouts echoed through the hall. Get them! They can't get out of here. He threw the girl through the window first, right into the branches of the tree, then jumped after her. The branches scratched his arms and tore his shirt, but they managed to climb down to the ground without getting seriously hurt. To the car, he shouted, running across the gardens with the girl in his arms. But when they reached the garage, they discovered that their tires had been slashed. They thought of everything, he murmured, looking around desperately. There! The girl pointed to the back fence. There's a hole. The street kids use it to come in and get fruit. They ran to the fence and found a small opening, almost invisible among the plants. It was too tight for him, but maybe... Can you get through and go get help? I'm not leaving you alone. Her eyes filled with tears. You promised you would protect me, and I will protect you. But I need you to be brave now. He took out of his pocket the keys to a safe deposit box that he kept in a bank downtown. See this address. If you can get there, say that you're my daughter. There are documents and enough money to keep you safe. And you? I'll buy time. Maybe I can convince them that you ran far away. The girl held the keys as if they were a talisman. No, we're going together, or we're not going at all. At that moment they heard voices approaching through the gardens. His sister was coordinating a systematic search of the property. Did you check the pool, the caretaker's cottage? They can't have gone far. The girl looked at the fence, then at him, and a determined expression came over her small face. I have an idea, but you have to trust me. What do you want to do? Remember that I survived on the streets. I know how to hide in places that adults never look. She pointed to a pile of firewood, covered by a tarp, near the fence. There's a space underneath. We can both fit if we squeeze in tight. It was a desperate hiding place, but maybe it would work. They squeezed under the tarp, between the logs, just minutes before the voices came closer. I'm sure I saw movement around here, said a male voice. Search everything. Behind every tree, every bush. For the next 20 minutes, which felt like hours, they remained motionless in the cramped hiding place. The girl barely breathed, and he could feel her little body tense against his. Heavy footsteps trampled the grass around them, sometimes so close that he could hear the breath of their pursuers. "There's nothing here," said one of the voices finally. "They must have managed to get off the property." "Impossible. We checked all the gates." "Then they're hiding somewhere we haven't looked. Or the child knows secret passages. Those street kids are like rats." When the footsteps finally moved away, they remained hidden for a few more minutes. The girl whispered in his ear, "They'll be back. We have to leave now." "Where to?" "They must be watching all the exits. There's a pipe that goes under the fence. Rainwater uses it to go to the street. It's small, but I've gone through it before." "When?" "When I came to get fruit before I met you." Her eyes sparkled in the dim light under the tarp. "I can show you." They carefully crawled out of the hiding place and headed to the lowest part of the garden, where she pointed to an almost invisible opening at the base of the fence. It was really very small, a concrete tunnel through which rainwater drained. "You go first," he said. "If anything goes wrong, keep running and don't look back. And you? I'll try to get through too, but if I can't, you'll make it." Her voice was firm, full of a faith that he didn't know where she got it from. "You have to make it. We're a family now." The word family hit his heart with unexpected force. This fragile child who had lost everything still believed in them, still believed that they could escape together. She entered the tunnel first, her movements agile, like those of a small animal accustomed to tight spaces. He followed her, crawling through the damp concrete, his clothes tearing on the rough spots. When they finally emerged on the other side, they were on a side street that he barely recognized, even after years of living there. The girl helped him up, and they ran together along the deserted sidewalk. "Where to now?" he asked, panting. "Away from here. Anywhere they can't find us." But as they ran through the dark street, he realized that they had no money, no transportation, and nowhere to go. His own sister had become his enemy, and he didn't know who else he could trust. "Is there someone who can help us?" asked the girl, as if reading his thoughts. He thought for a moment. There was one person, someone he had drifted away from after his wife's death, but who might still care enough to help them. "Maybe," he said, "but we're going to have to walk a long way." "That's okay. I'm used to walking." As they walked through the streets of the metropolis, a terrible question grew in his mind. If his own sister was capable of betraying him, who else was involved in the conspiracy? And above all, even if they managed to escape this night, how could they prove the truth when everyone who should be protecting them was part of the problem? The streets of the metropolis looked different in the darkness, especially when you were on the run. The businessman held the girl's hand tightly as they walked along the deserted sidewalks, avoiding the main avenues where cars might be looking for them. Every sound of an engine made them hide behind posts or in the entrances of buildings. "You're hurt," observed the girl, noticing how he limped slightly and held his left arm. "I'm fine. They're just scratches." But the truth was that his rib still hurt from the earlier kidnapping, and the escape through the branches had opened some cuts that were now bleeding through his torn shirt. They had walked for almost an hour when they reached an older neighborhood of the city, where small, well-kept houses contrasted with the distant skyscrapers of the financial district. He stopped in front of a modest house, painted light blue, with a small but well-kept garden in the front. "Who lives here?" asked the girl. "Someone who has known me for a long time. I hope she still cares enough to help us." Before he could ring the doorbell, the door opened. A woman of about 50 appeared in the doorway, wearing a robe and with a worried expression on her face. Her grey hair was disheveled, as if she had just woken up. "I thought I heard voices out here," she said, but when she saw his state, her expression changed to shock. "My God, what happened to you?" "Helena," he said, his voice filled with relief. "We need help." The woman looked quickly at the street, as if checking if anyone was following them, then gestured for them to come in. "Come in, quick." The house inside was cozy and smelled of coffee and homemade bread. Family photos covered the walls, and old but well-maintained furniture created an atmosphere of home that made the girl feel immediately safer. "Sit down," said Helena, indicating a soft sofa. "I'll get some bandages for those cuts." While she was gone, the girl whispered, "She seems good. She has gentle eyes. She was my wife's secretary. She worked with her for 10 years before—" He didn't finish the sentence, but the girl understood. Helena returned with a first aid kit and began to clean the cuts on his arms. "Now tell me what's going on. And who is this beautiful child?" For the next 20 minutes he told the whole story: the kidnapping, how the girl saved him, the discovery of his sister's betrayal, and the escape from the mansion. Helena listened in silence, occasionally asking questions to clarify details. "Your sister was always ambitious," she said finally, finishing bandaging his arm. "But I never imagined she was capable of something like this. Do you believe me? I know it sounds crazy. I believe you because I've known you for 15 years, and because this child has the eyes of someone who has experienced real trauma." Helena knelt in front of the girl. "How are you feeling, dear?" "Scared," admitted the girl, "but less scared when I'm with him." "And what do you call him?" The girl looked at the businessman, then back at Helena. "Daddy," she said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The word hit his heart like an arrow. In the midst of all the chaos and danger, this child had chosen to trust him completely, had chosen to consider him family. Helena smiled, but there were tears in her eyes. "Your wife would be so happy to know that you found someone to love again. The problem is that I don't know how to protect her. My sister has resources, contacts, and now controls the company. She can invent any story about me. But you have something that she doesn't have," said Helena. "What?" "The truth, and people who care about you." She stood up and went to a drawer, from which she took out an old phone. "I'm going to call some people. There are lawyers who have known you and your family for years who won't believe her lies." While Helena made the calls in a low voice in the next room, the girl snuggled against him on the sofa. "Daddy, if the bad lady finds us here, will Miss Helena be in danger too?" The question made him realize the extent of what they were doing. By asking Helena for help, he was potentially putting another innocent person at risk. "Maybe we should leave," he murmured. "No," said the girl firmly. "Good people need to stick together when bad people try to hurt. My grandma always said that." Helena came back with a more optimistic expression. "I managed to talk to Dr. Robert, your old lawyer. He said that he had always suspected that something strange was happening with the company's finances in recent months." "Robert? I thought he was working with my sister." "Not directly. She hired other lawyers for the more creative operations. Robert only took care of the traditional contracts." Helena sat in an armchair in front of them. "He wants to meet with you tomorrow, but he said you need concrete evidence." "What kind of evidence?" "Documents, recordings, anything that proves that your sister was diverting funds or conspiring against you." The businessman thought for a moment. "There were some files on my personal computer, but they're at the mansion." "What if we went back to get them?" suggested the girl. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous." "But I know the house now. I know where the cameras are, where there are blind spots." Her eyes sparkled with surprising intelligence. "On the streets, I learned how to enter places without being seen." "She's right," said Helena thoughtfully. "A small child can go unnoticed where an adult would be noticed immediately." "You're both crazy. I'm not going to put a 4-year-old child in danger to get some files." "But it's not some files," insisted Helena. "It's the difference between recovering your life and losing everything. Your sister will destroy any evidence she can, if she hasn't already." The girl stood up and went to the window, watching the street outside. "There are 2 cars that weren't here when we arrived," she said calmly. His blood ran cold. He and Helena ran to the window and saw 2 dark sedans parked in strategic spots on the street, from where they could observe the entire house. "How did they find us?" whispered Helena. "There must be cameras on the street or someone saw us." He picked up the girl. "We have to get out of here, now." "Wait," said Helena, grabbing a small backpack. "I'm coming with you." "Helena, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. You're going to need a place to stay, and I know people who can help." She stuffed a few things into the backpack quickly. "Besides, your wife made me promise that I would take care of you if anything happened to her." "She said that?" "She did. In the last days before the accident, she was worried about your sister, about some strange decisions that were being made in the company." Helena stopped what she was doing and faced him. She suspected that something wasn't right. The revelation hit him like a punch. His wife had sensed the betrayal before him, had tried to warn him, and he was so absorbed in his own problems that he didn't pay attention. "She tried to tell me," he murmured. "In the last weeks before the accident, she was always trying to talk about the company, about my sister. I thought it was jealousy. It wasn't jealousy, it was woman's intuition." Helena finished packing the backpack. "And now you two are going to finish what she started." They went out the back door, crossing Helena's yard, until they reached the yard of the neighboring house. The girl guided them, her street skills proving valuable as she found paths between the houses that adults would never notice. "Where are we going now?" he asked as they ran crouched between the shadows. "I know a place," said Helena, "an old school where I volunteer on weekends. It has computers, a phone, and no one will look for us there during the night." "What about the company files?" "First, we'll get organized and make a real plan. Then we'll decide about the files." But as they crossed yet another yard, the girl stopped suddenly. "Wait," she whispered. "What is it?" "Listen." They stood still and could hear the sound of heavy footsteps approaching, low voices coordinating a search. His sister had mobilized more people, and now they were being hunted systematically. "She's not going to give up," said Helena. "She has too many resources, knows too many people." "Then we have to be smarter than her," said the girl, her voice small but determined. "We have to make her think we're in a place where we're not." "How?" The child's eyes shone in the darkness. "I have an idea. But you're going to have to trust me." The businessman looked at that fragile girl who had already saved them twice, and he realized that she might be the only person he could trust completely. "What do you want to do?" "I'm going to give myself up to her." "Absolutely not. Let me finish." The girl held his hand. "I'm going to give myself up, but I'm going to take something that she wants very much. While she's focused on me, you can get the evidence." "It's too dangerous. Our whole life is dangerous now," she said with a wisdom that shouldn't exist in a 4-year-old child. "But if we keep running forever, she'll always have more resources than us. We have to turn the tables." Helena looked from the girl to him, then back to the girl. "What kind of thing would she want very much?" The girl smiled, a small smile but full of courage. "The code to the safe where he keeps the most important backups. She'll want that a lot. But you don't know the code." "No, but she doesn't know that I don't know." The girl's plan was both brilliant and terrifying. For an entire hour the businessman tried to dissuade her, proposing alternatives, but she remained firm in her decision. Helena watched the debate with a worried expression, torn between admiration for the child's courage and the horror of putting someone so young in danger. "Listen," said the girl finally, her voice small but determined. "On the streets, I learned that sometimes the only way to survive is to make the bad people think you're not dangerous. They never expect a child to be clever. But you are dangerous to them," said the businessman. "You're the only witness to the original kidnapping." "Exactly. That's why she wants to catch me so badly. If I give myself up, she'll lower her guard for a little while, thinking she's won." The girl's eyes sparkled with a frightening intelligence. "And that's all you need." They were hidden in the basement of the abandoned school that Helena had suggested. The place smelled of mold and old paper, but it had old computers that still worked and a telephone line that could be useful. More importantly, it had several exits and hiding places in case they were discovered. "Even if it works," said Helena, "how are you going to get out of there afterwards, as soon as your sister realizes she's been tricked?" "That's where the second part of the plan comes in." The girl smiled, showing that she had thought further ahead than anyone imagined. "She's going to take me somewhere, right? And while that's happening, you're going to call Dr. Robert with all the evidence. When she discovers she's been tricked, the police will already know everything. What if she hurts you before that?" The businessman's voice was filled with agony. "What if something goes wrong? Then at least you'll be free to tell the truth." She touched her grandmother's necklace, her talisman of courage. "My grandma always said that sometimes we need to be brave to protect the people we love." His heart broke hearing those words. This child was willing to sacrifice herself for him, and he couldn't bear the idea of letting her face his sister alone. "There has to be another way," he insisted. "What? Keep running forever? Your sister has money, has contacts, has resources. We only have the truth." The girl stood up and walked to one of the dirty windows of the basement. "But the truth only matters if someone can tell it." Helena approached him. "She's right, you know. And if we don't act soon, your sister will have time to destroy all the evidence and create a narrative where you're the villain. She's already doing that." He ran his hands over his face, tired and defeated. "She's probably already spread the word that I kidnapped a child, that I'm having a nervous breakdown. Then we have to be faster than her." The girl came back to him. "Daddy, do you trust me?" The simple question contained a world of meaning. He looked at that fragile child who had already saved his life twice, who had faced horrors no child should ever know, and realized she was the bravest person he knew. "I trust you," he finally said. "But if something goes wrong, it won't." She climbed onto his lap and hugged him tightly. "We're family now. Families protect each other." Over the next hour, they refined the details of the plan. The little one would turn herself in at a public area of sprawling metropolis where there would be plenty of witnesses. She would say she knew where the backup of the most important files were, but would only tell if she was taken somewhere safe. This would give the businessman and Helena time to get to the mansion and retrieve the real evidence. "Remember," the little one said, rehearsing her part, "I'll say the code is hidden in a place only I know. That'll make her keep me alive until she finds out where it is. And if she doesn't believe you, she will. Bad people always think everyone lies like they do." When it was time to put the plan into action, the businessman felt like he was sending his own daughter into the lion's den. The little one sensed his hesitation and took his hand. "It'll be okay, Daddy," she said. "And when it's all over, we can be a real family, without anyone trying to tear us apart. Promise you'll be careful." "I promise." "And you promise you'll come get me." "I promise." They separated in a busy downtown plaza. The little one walked alone towards a payphone, while the businessman and Helena hid behind a newsstand to observe. Every step she took felt like tearing a piece from his heart. The little one dialed a number Helena had discovered, his sister's personal cell. Even from a distance, they could see the child's confident posture as she spoke. "Hello, is this Miss Gable? It's me, the little girl you're looking for." Her voice was clear and calm. "I want to make a deal with you." On the other end of the line, his sister must have been shocked because the little one remained silent for a long time, just listening. "I know where he hid the codes to the most important vaults. But I'll only tell you if you promise not to hurt him." Another pause. "I'm in Central Plaza, near the fountain. Come alone, or I run and you'll never find the codes." She hung up the phone and sat on the edge of the fountain, swinging her little legs like any normal kid would. But the businessman could see the tension in her small shoulders, the way she constantly checked the exits of the plaza. 15 minutes later, his sister appeared, accompanied only by Miss Huckleberry. She walked calmly towards the little one, but even from a distance it was possible to see the contained fury in her movements. "Where is he?" was the first thing she said. Far away, and I'll only tell you where the codes are if you promise not to hurt him. How do I know you really know anything? The little one smiled with calculated innocence. Because I was with him when he opened the vault. I saw him type in the numbers and put away some very important papers. It was a perfect lie, told with all the conviction a 4-year-old could have. His sister hesitated, clearly trying to decide whether to believe her or not. All right, she said finally. But you're coming with me, we're going to talk in private. Only if you promise you won't hurt me. I promise. We just want to talk. The businessman watched in horror as his sister took the little one by the hand and led her towards a dark car parked nearby. Every fiber of his being screamed for him to run over there and stop it. But he knew that would ruin the plan and put everyone in even greater danger. Now it's our turn, Helena said, pulling him by the arm. We have to get to the mansion before she realizes she's been tricked. They ran through the streets until they found a cab. During the entire ride to his house, the businessman couldn't stop thinking about the little one, imagining where his sister was taking her, whether she was being kind or if she had already discovered the lie. The mansion was surprisingly deserted when they arrived. Apparently, his sister had mobilized all her goons for the search around the city. They entered through the same back window they had used to escape. Where to first? Helena asked. My office. There's a hidden safe behind the books, where I keep the most important backups. They climbed the stairs silently, but when they reached the office, they found a terrible surprise. The place had been ransacked, drawers overturned, papers scattered across the floor, and the secret safe was open and empty. She got here first, he murmured, looking at the destruction. Did she look in all the computers too? They checked quickly. All the hard drives had been removed or destroyed. Years of documents, evidence of all the shady dealings, everything was gone. It's over, he said, slumping into a chair. There's nothing left. She wiped everything. Wait, Helena said, noticing something on the floor. Was this picture in your safe? It was a picture of his wife, but there was something strange about it. The frame was slightly open, as if it had been forced. She always kept important things in unexpected places, Helena said, carefully examining the frame. Look at this. Behind the photo there was a small pen drive taped on, a pen drive his sister hadn't found because she didn't know his wife's habits. What's on it? He asked, plugging the device into the only computer that still worked. The screen filled with files, documents, spreadsheets, audio recordings. His wife had systematically documented all his sister's shady activities for months before her death. She knew, he whispered, reading the files. She figured everything out and was gathering evidence. And now you have everything you need to take down your sister, Helena said. But first, we need to save the little one. As if summoned by her words, the house phone rang. It was his sister, and her voice was laced with cold fury. Congratulations, dear brother. Your little liar is very convincing, but now that I know she tricked me, I'll have to get more creative with her. If you touch a hair on her head, you'll what? You have no company, no money, nothing left, and soon you won't have your little savior either. The line went dead, and he realized that they had won the battle for the evidence, but the war was far from over. Now, they had to find the little one before his sister figured out a way to get rid of the only remaining witness. Despair washed over the businessman as he and Helena frantically analyzed the files left by his wife. Each document revealed more details of his sister's conspiracy, but nothing indicated where she might have taken the little one. The audio recordings showed conversations between his sister and unknown individuals, planning diversions of millions in stocks and Bitcoin investments, but none mentioned specific locations. There has to be a clue here, Helena murmured, desperately flipping through the spreadsheets. Your wife was very meticulous. If she suspected something, she must have investigated everything. She always was, he agreed, remembering his wife's determination when she wanted to find something out. But we're wasting time. Every minute that passes, my sister could be... He couldn't finish the sentence. The idea of what his sister could do to the little one was unbearable. That brave child had risked everything to save him, and now he felt completely powerless to return the favor. His phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number. "Daddy?" The little one's small, frightened voice came through the line, making his heart leap. "Little one, where are you? Are you hurt?" I'm in a dark place. It smells like car oil, and there's the sound of water." Her voice was weak, but she was clearly trying to give clues. "The bad lady said you have until midnight to hand over all the files your wife hid, or she'll take me to a place very far away." How does she know about my wife's files? She said she always knew the pretty-haired lady was investigating her. That's why. The little one's voice was muffled as if someone had covered the phone. His sister's voice took its place. "Now do you understand, dear brother? Your precious wife was meddling where she shouldn't have. Accidents happen to people who are too curious." The revelation hit him like a lightning bolt. You killed my wife?" "I solved a problem that was threatening our business, just like I'm going to solve this problem now." Her voice was cold, without any trace of remorse. "You have 3 hours. Bring all the files to the warehouse where it all began, and come alone, or the child disappears forever." The line went dead, leaving him trembling with rage and horror. His sister wasn't just a con artist, she was a murderer, and now she had the little one. "The warehouse where it all began," Helena repeated. "She wants you to go back to the place of the first kidnapping. It's an obvious trap. She'll kill me as soon as I hand over the files." "Then don't hand over the real files." Helena stood up and began pacing back and forth, thinking quickly. "We need a better plan. There's no time for plans. I have to save her. And you will." "But smartly." Helena stopped in front of him. "Did your wife leave copies of those files somewhere else?" "I don't know. Why?" "Because we're going to hand over fake files, rescue the little one, and still make sure your sister gets arrested." Over the next hour, they worked frantically to create convincing fake files, mixing real information with fabricated data. Helena called Dr. Robert and explained the situation, asking him to mobilize the authorities to be ready to act. "The problem," she said after hanging up, "is that your sister probably has contacts in the authorities too. She could be tipped off before they get to the warehouse. So what do we do?" "With some unexpected help." Helena smiled for the first time in hours. "Remember when you said the little one mentioned the smell of oil and the sound of water?" "Yeah. There's only one place in the abandoned industrial district that fits that description. An abandoned auto repair shop near the river. It used to belong to the father of one of your employees." "How do you know that?" "Because your wife asked me to investigate properties your sister was secretly buying. That repair shop was one of them." The businessman felt a spark of hope. "So we know where she is." "We do. And we're going to get there before midnight." They gathered the fake files and left the mansion, but this time they took a different route. Instead of going directly to the warehouse where his sister was waiting, they headed to the abandoned repair shop near the river. The place was exactly as the little one had described. It smelled of old oil, and the sound of water lapping against the nearby dock was constant. 2 windows upstairs were lit, and they could see shadows moving inside. "How are we going to get in without being seen?" Helena asked. "The little one taught me a few things about hiding." He smiled sadly, remembering the survival lessons a 4-year-old had given him. "We'll use the back entrance." They approached the building silently, using the piles of old tires and rusted equipment as cover. Through a cracked window, they could see inside. The little one was sitting in a chair in the center of the room, tied up but apparently unharmed. His sister was pacing back and forth, visibly nervous, constantly checking a sleek phone. 2 men stood guard near the main door. "At least she's alive," Helena whispered. "For now, but your sister is getting impatient." As if she could hear their thoughts, his sister began yelling at the men. "Where is he? He should have been here by now." "Maybe he's not coming. one of the men said. Maybe he ran out of the city. He'll come. That annoying child has become too important to him. She stopped in front of the little one. Isn't that right, sweetie? The little one lifted her chin with a courage that impressed even from afar. He'll come, and when he does, you'll regret messing with our family. Your family? His sister laughed cruelly. You're a street urchin. He just took pity on you. That's not true. He really loves me, and I love him. The little one's voice was firm without hesitation. That's more than you'll have in your whole life. The response enraged his sister, who raised her hand as if to hit the child, but before she could do that, her phone rang. Where are you? She screamed when she answered. It's past midnight. Outside, the businessman called her using his own phone. Change of plans. I want to see the little one first. Prove she's okay, and I'll take the files wherever you want. You're not in a position to make demands. I am. Because without the files, you can't prove I'm mentally unstable. And without that proof, you can't take control of the company. His voice was surprisingly calm. The little one first, then we talk business. His sister hesitated, clearly frustrated. You have 5 minutes to get to the warehouse, or she disappears forever. I'm on my way. He hung up and turned to Helena. Now it's my turn to trust you. When I go in there, call the cops. No matter what happens to me, there's another way. We can wait for the police to arrive first. There's no time, and besides, she has contacts in the authorities. She might get a warning. He took a deep breath. The little one risked everything for me. Now it's my turn. How are you going to get her out of there? Improvising. That's what she did when she saved me the first time. He headed towards the main entrance of the repair shop, leaving Helena hidden with instructions to call Dr. Robert in exactly 10 minutes, no matter what happened. When he entered the room, his sister smiled with satisfaction. Finally decided to be sensible. I decided to protect my daughter. He looked directly at the little one, who smiled despite the visible fear in her eyes. I'm sorry I took so long. It's okay, Daddy. I knew you'd come. How touching, his sister said sarcastically. Now the files. First, untie her. The files first. He took a pen drive from his pocket and held it up high. It's all here. All the evidence my wife collected about your activities. Embezzlement, stock manipulation, illegal Bitcoin investments, everything. His sister's eyes glittered with greed. Throw it over here. First, untie the little one. His sister gestured to one of the men who approached the chair. But instead of untying the ropes, he simply loosened them enough so the little one could move, but not run away. Done. Now the pen drive. The businessman threw the device to her, who caught it eagerly. But when she inserted it into a laptop nearby, her expression quickly changed from triumph to fury. These files are corrupted. There's nothing useful here. There is. There's enough evidence to send you to prison. He smiled for the first time in days. It's just not the evidence you wanted. At that moment, sirens began to blare in the distance. Helena had fulfilled her part of the plan, and the authorities were arriving. You tricked me, his sister screamed, pulling out a gun he didn't know she possessed. No, I learned from the best teacher. He looked at the little one. A 4-year-old taught me that sometimes we have to be clever to protect the people we love. The little one, taking advantage of the fact that her ropes were loosened, managed to break free completely and ran behind a pile of tires. "Run!" she shouted. "The bad lady is very angry." But it was too late to escape. His sister was between them and the only exit, and the sound of the sirens only made her more desperate and dangerous. The gun in his sister's hand trembled slightly, but her eyes held a deadly coldness he had never seen before. The sound of the sirens grew closer and closer, echoing off the metal walls of the abandoned repair shop, like a reminder that time was running out for everyone inside. "You ruined everything," she screamed, alternating the aim of the gun between him and the direction where the little one had hidden. Years of planning, millions of dollars in carefully orchestrated investments, all because of an insignificant beggar. She's not insignificant. the businessman said, keeping his hands raised but taking small steps toward the pile of tires where the little one was hiding. "She's the bravest person I know." "Brave?" His sister laughed hysterically. "She's a street kid who can't even spell her own name right." From behind the tires, the little one's small but firm voice echoed through the room. "I can spell my name, and I can spell murderer too." The child's audacity made one of the goons laugh nervously, but that only increased the sister's fury. "Your dear little brother won't be able to protect you much longer. When I'm done with you two, I'm going to tell everyone that he had a psychotic break and tried to kill me. Nobody will believe that," he said, continuing his cautious movements. "Not after they see the real evidence." "What real evidence? You gave me fake files." "Fake, but based on real information," he smiled, even with a gun pointed at him. "And the real evidence has been in Dr. Roberts' hands for hours." His sister's face paled. "Impossible. I destroyed everything. You destroyed everything you found at my house, but you didn't know that my wife had made copies and left them with people she trusted." Each word was a carefully constructed lie, but it was working. He could see the doubt growing in her eyes. The sirens were now very close, and through the windows they could see red and blue lights reflecting on the walls of the repair shop. The two goons began to get nervous, looking at the door as if calculating their chances of escape. "We have to get out of here," one of them said. "The cops are going to surround the building in a few minutes." "Nobody's leaving until I sort this out," the sister screamed, her voice filled with despair. "You were paid to do a job, so do it." "We weren't paid to face an entire police operation," the second man replied, already heading toward a back window. The division among the criminals gave the businessman the opportunity he was waiting for. While his sister turned to yell at the fleeing men, he threw himself in the direction of the pile of tires where the little one was hiding. "Run to the back exit," he whispered to her. "I'll stay here and buy time." "No," she whispered back, grabbing his shirt. "I'm not leaving you alone with her. We're family." The sound of heavy footsteps and authoritative voices began to echo from outside the building. The police had arrived and were positioning themselves around the repair shop. "Come out with your hands up," shouted a voice amplified by a megaphone. "The building is surrounded." His sister began to pace back and forth like a caged animal, the gun still aimed in the general direction where they were hiding. "This is all your fault. If you hadn't meddled in my business, none of this would have happened. Your business included stealing millions from our company and killing my wife," he replied, his voice filled with cold rage. "You think I was going to let that slide? Your wife was a busybody. She was getting in the way of plans that would take our company to be worth billions. Everything I did was for our family. For you, everything you did was for greed." The little one pulled his sleeve and whispered, "Daddy, there's a little door back there. I think it goes to the outside." He looked in the direction she indicated and saw a low door, probably used for ventilation, that was ajar. It was too small for an adult, but a child could fit through. "You go," he whispered, "only if you come too. I don't fit in that space. Then we stay here together." Her stubbornness left him both frustrated and proud. This child had learned on the toughest streets of the city that sometimes you have to abandon people to survive. But even so, she refused to leave him behind. Outside, the voice of the megaphone sounded again. "You have 2 minutes to come out peacefully. After that, we're coming in." His sister seemed to make a desperate decision. She headed in the direction of the pile of tires, the gun firmly pointed ahead. "The game's over," she shouted. "Come out now, or I'll shoot." "You're not going to shoot," he said, slowly emerging from behind the pile with his hands raised. "Because if you shoot, the police will come in here and you'll lose any chance to negotiate." "Negotiate what? My life is ruined because of you. Your life is ruined because you chose to be a criminal and a murderer." He took another step forward, placing himself between her and the little one. "But you can still do the right thing. You can turn yourself in and tell the truth." "The truth?" She laughed bitterly. "The truth is, I built a financial empire while you were crying over your wife's death. The truth is, I turned our little company into an investment powerhouse that moves hundreds of millions in stocks and cryptocurrencies. With stolen money, with destroyed lives, with business acumen you never had." At that moment, the main door of the repair shop burst inward with a deafening crash. Law enforcement agents rushed in, guns drawn, shouting commands. "Guns on the floor, hands on your head." His sister turned towards the agents, and for one terrifying moment, he thought she was going to attempt a suicidal confrontation. But then, perhaps realizing the futility of the situation, she let the gun fall onto the concrete floor with a metallic clang that echoed through the room. "She's here!" the little one shouted, emerging from behind the tires and running into his arms. "Daddy's okay." The next few minutes were a blur of activity. His sister was handcuffed and led away, yelling accusations and threats that no one else took seriously. The agents asked quick questions, checked if they were injured, and gradually the tension that had dominated that place for so long began to dissipate. Helena appeared at the door, accompanied by Dr. Robert and two other men in suits he didn't immediately recognize. "Thank God you're all right," she said, hugging them both. "When I heard the shouting outside, I thought—" "We're okay," he said, still holding the little one tightly against his chest. "Thanks to the bravest plan I've ever seen in my life." "It really worked," the little one said, smiling for the first time in hours. "The bad lady really believed I knew where the codes were." Dr. Robert approached with a serious but relieved expression. "The evidence Helena brought me is more than enough. Your sister will face charges of embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, and now attempted murder. She won't be getting out of prison for the next 20 years. What about my business, the company? With the evidence we have, we prove that all the illegal operations were conducted without your knowledge. The company can continue operating normally under your leadership." Dr. Robert paused and smiled. "In fact, after we recover all the assets your sister hid in offshore accounts and undeclared investments, you might find you're even wealthier than you imagined." But while the adults discussed legal and financial matters, the little one tugged on his shirt. "Daddy, now that the bad lady is gone, can I still be your real daughter?" The simple question contained a world of hope and fear. This child had risked everything for him, had faced dangers that adults couldn't endure, and now just wanted to know if she had a permanent home. "Forever," he promised, kneeling down to her level. "You're not just my daughter at heart. We're going to do all the legal paperwork, so you're my official daughter too." "Really? I'll have a real family name?" "The most beautiful one I can find," he said, his words choked with emotion. As they left the abandoned auto repair shop, walking towards the blue and red lights that were still flashing in the street, the little one held his hand tightly. "Daddy, you know what my grandma always used to say?" "What?" "That sometimes bad things happen so we can find the good things that were hidden." He looked at that extraordinary child who had transformed his life in ways he could never have imagined, and realized that her grandma was right. Amidst all the betrayal and pain, he had found something he didn't know he was looking for, a real family. But as they walked towards the future they could finally build together, neither of them knew that the biggest surprise was yet to come. 2 weeks had passed since the night at the abandoned auto repair shop, and life at the mansion was starting to settle into a routine that the businessman hadn't experienced in years. The little one had completely adapted to her new reality as an official daughter. The adoption papers were being processed, and she now attended a private school where she had quickly become beloved by the teachers. But on that Thursday morning, while they were having breakfast in the sunny kitchen, Dr. Robert appeared at the door with an expression that mixed excitement and worry. He held a bulky folder and looked like he had spent the night awake. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, accepting a cup of coffee from Helena, who now lived with them as the housekeeper and a mother figure to the little one. "But we discovered something in the investigations of your sister's bank account that you need to know." "Did you find more embezzled money?" the businessman asked, watching as the little one played distractedly with her cereal, seemingly oblivious to the adult's conversation. We found something much more significant. Doctor. Robert opened the folder and spread some documents on the table. Your sister was paying substantial monthly sums to a private clinic for the past 4 years, always on the same day, always the same amount. What kind of clinic? Long-term care for patients in a vegetative state. The businessman felt a chill in his stomach. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything, I'm stating it. Dr. Robert pulled a photo from inside the folder. Your wife is alive. The silence that followed was deafening. The little one stopped playing with her food and looked at the adults, realizing that something very serious was happening. Helena covered her mouth with her hands, and the businessman felt like the world had stopped spinning. That's impossible, he murmured. I saw the accident. I was at the hospital. They said she was brain dead. Dr. Robert corrected. Your sister arranged for the transfer to a private clinic, claiming that you weren't in an emotional state to make medical decisions. The doctors at the clinic managed to stabilize her, but she remained in a coma for 2 years. For 2 years. And then, 6 months ago, she woke up. The revelation fell on them like a bomb. The businessman stood up from his chair so abruptly that he almost knocked it over, walking to the window without really seeing the garden outside. His wife, the woman he had mourned, for whom he had isolated himself from the world, had been alive for 6 months. Why did my sister hide this from me? He asked, although he already knew the answer. Because a living wife would complicate her plans to take full control of the company and your personal assets. Dr. Robert closed the folder. She was paying the clinic to keep your wife sedated, claiming she was mentally unstable and dangerous. The little one got down from the chair and approached him, taking his hand with her small, warm hands. Daddy, are you okay? He looked at that child who had become the center of his world and realized that his joy was mixed with a terrible confusion. How to explain to her that there was another person who also had a right to the title of family? I'm okay, little one. Just surprised. Where is she now? Helena asked, asking the question he couldn't formulate. At the same clinic. The doctors say she's physically recovered, but psychologically still very fragile. She knows she spent years unconscious, but she doesn't know about the recent developments. Dr. Robert looked significantly at the little one. She doesn't know about me, the little one concluded with her usual perceptiveness. She doesn't. And the doctors think it would be too traumatic to reveal everything at once. The businessman returned to the table and sat down heavily. Does she want to see me? She does. In fact, she's been asking about you constantly since she woke up. The doctors at the clinic believe that seeing you would be beneficial to her recovery. And me? Where do I fit into all this? The little one's voice was small, but filled with a fear that broke his heart. You're still my daughter, he said immediately, pulling her onto his lap. Nothing will change that, ever. But she was your wife before. She's more important. It's not a question of importance. You're both the most important people in my life. He held her face between his hands. And I'm sure that when she meets you, she'll love you as much as I do. Dr. Robert spoke again. There's an additional complication. Legally, your wife still has rights to your assets and to family decisions. The adoption may be more complex than we imagined. What does that mean? It means that she needs to agree to the adoption for it to be valid. The weight of this information fell on the businessman like a mountain. His wife, who knew nothing about the events of the last few months, would have to approve the adoption of an unknown child, a child who had occupied the emotional space that once belonged to her. When can I see her? He asked. Today, if you want. The doctors think the sooner the better. I'm going with you, the little one said determinedly. Little one, maybe it's better. No. Her voice had that firmness that he had learned to respect. If she's going to decide about my future, she has to meet me first. She has to know who I really am. Helena spoke up. She's right. It's not fair to judge the situation without knowing everyone involved. Dr. Roberts seemed hesitant. The doctors recommended a gradual approach. The doctors don't know that this little girl faced kidnappers and saved my life twice, the businessman said. If anyone can handle difficult situations, it's her. An hour later, they were in the car, heading to the private clinic in the suburbs of sprawling metropolis. The little one had insisted on wearing her prettiest dress and had asked Helena to braid her hair. Throughout the ride, she remained quiet, clearly nervous but determined. "Daddy," she said as they were arriving, "what if she doesn't like me?" "Impossible. You're impossible not to love. But what if she wants you to choose between her and me?" The question he had feared most had been asked by the person he loved most. "There won't be a need to choose," he said, although he wasn't sure if that was true. The clinic was a modern and welcoming building, surrounded by well-kept gardens. They were greeted by Dr. Marcus, a middle-aged psychiatrist, who had cared for his wife for the past 6 months. "She's anxious to see you," the doctor said, leading them through the silent hallways. "But remember that she's still very fragile emotionally. The transition from the coma to consciousness was traumatic, and finding out about your sister's lies only made things worse." "Does she know about my sister?" "She does. We had to tell her when she started asking why you never visited. It was a shock to discover that her own sister-in-law was keeping her prisoner." They stopped in front of a door painted white. "She's in here. Remember, slow movements, calm voices, and maybe it's best not to mention complicated detail on the first visit." The businessman took a deep breath, held the little one's hand, and entered the room. His wife was sitting in an armchair near the window, looking out at the gardens. When she heard the door open, she turned, and their eyes met for the first time in almost 3 years. "Maria," he whispered, using the name he hadn't spoken for so long. "I thought you had forgotten me," she said, her voice weak but filled with emotion. "Never. Not for a second." She stood up slowly and walked towards him, but stopped when she saw the little one beside him. "And who is this little princess?" she asked, kneeling down to the child's level. The little one looked at the businessman, then at his wife, and finally found the courage to speak. "I'm his daughter," she said simply. "And if you let me, I'd like to be your daughter too." The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds, but it seemed eternal. Then, to everyone's surprise, his wife smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen on her face since the accident. "What's your name, honey?" The little one said her name in a clear and proud voice. "It's a beautiful name," his wife said. "And you know what I think?" "What?" "I think this family was incomplete without you." The unexpected answer brought tears to the businessman's face, and the little one threw herself into his wife's arms with a confidence that only children possess. "Will you be mad if I call you Mom too?" the little one asked. "I'll be mad if you don't call me that," his wife replied, hugging the child as if she had always been part of her life. At that moment, the businessman realized that the human heart has an infinite capacity to love, and that sometimes the most perfect families are those that are formed in completely unexpected ways. The days that followed the first meeting were an emotional roller coaster for everyone involved. His wife, who now insisted that the little one call her Mom Maria, began the gradual process of readapting to life outside the clinic. But the after-effects of the years in a coma and the months of forced medication proved to be more complex than anyone had imagined. "She has episodes," Dr. Marcus explained during a private consultation with the businessman. "Moments where she can't clearly distinguish between past and present. Sometimes she wakes up thinking she's still in the hospital after the accident. Other times she has flashbacks of the last months in the clinic. Will that pass? With time and proper therapy, yes. But the process can be long and sometimes painful." The doctor flipped through his notes. "What worries me most are the panic attacks she has when she's alone. She seems to have developed a very intense phobia of abandonment." The businessman understood perfectly. For 3 years, his wife had been kept away from everything she knew and loved, waking up in a world where she no longer knew who to trust. The betrayal of her own sister-in-law had shaken her basic ability to trust people. At home, the dynamic was adjusting slowly. The little one, with her childlike ability to adapt, had immediately accepted Maria's presence as something natural. She constantly drew figures of a family of 3, always with huge smiles and surrounded by her characteristic colorful birds. "Mom, Maria," she asked one afternoon while they were playing in the garden, "why did you sleep for so long?" Maria looked at the businessman, seeking help in explaining something so complex to a 4-year-old. Sometimes, when people get very hurt, they need to sleep for a long time to get better. Like Sleeping Beauty. Similar to that, yes. And Daddy was your prince who woke you up. Maria smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. Actually, you were the one who helped me really wake up. Me? Yes. When I found out that he had found a brave little girl who needed a family, that gave me the strength to get better faster. The answer made the little one smile and run to hug Maria. But the businessman noticed in the subtext what his wife wasn't saying. She was fighting her own mind to adapt to this new reality. The nights were especially difficult. Maria suffered from severe insomnia and often woke up with nightmares where she relived the accident or dreamed she was back in the clinic, sedated against her will. During these crises, only the presence of the little one seemed to calm her down. "It's strange," she commented on one of those early mornings, while the 3 were sitting in the living room, "but when I look at her, I feel like my heart remembers how to love again." The little one, who should have been sleeping but had come down to comfort her, snuggled between them on the sofa. "My grandma always said that love never ends. It just hides sometimes." "Your grandma was very wise," Maria said, kissing the child's head. "She was. And she also said that special families are made of people who choose each other, not just people who are born together." During the following weeks, the family routine gradually settled. Maria began intensive therapy to deal with the trauma of the past years, while the little one continued her adaptation to school. The businessman divided his time between rebuilding the company, now free from the criminal interference of his sister, and caring for his 2 most important women. But it was during a family therapy session that Dr. Marcus revealed something that would change everything again. "Maria," he said, consulting his notes, "there's something about your medical condition that we need to discuss." "Any problems?" the businessman asked, immediately concerned. "Not exactly a problem, but the tests we did during your recovery revealed something unexpected." The doctor paused, choosing his words carefully. "You were pregnant when you had the accident." The silence in the room was absolute. Maria paled, and the businessman felt like the world had stopped once again. "Was I?" Maria repeated in a weak voice. "The trauma of the accident and the prolonged coma. Well, we lost the baby in the first few weeks." Dr. Marcus leaned forward with compassion. "I'm so sorry. I know this must be devastating." Maria began to cry silently, and the businessman moved to hug her. They had tried to have children for years without success, and to find out that they had been so close. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" she asked through tears. "Because you were unconscious, and then, when you woke up, the doctors thought it was too much trauma to process at once." The little one, who had been playing quietly in the corner of the room, approached the armchair where Maria was crying. "Mom, Maria, why are you sad?" Because we lost a baby that you didn't even know existed," she explained, trying to control her tears. The little one thought for a moment, then climbed onto the armchair and hugged Maria. "But you didn't lose me, and I didn't lose you." The simplicity of the observation struck both Maria and the businessman like a ray of light in the darkness. This child, who had appeared in their lives so unexpectedly, wasn't just an addition to the family. She was, in a way, an answer to the prayers they didn't even know they had made. "You're right, honey," Maria said, hugging the little one tighter. We didn't lose you." That night, after the little one fell asleep, Maria and the businessman talked at length about the future. The revelation about the lost pregnancy had been painful, but it had also brought unexpected clarity. "You know what impresses me most about her?" Maria said, looking through the window of the little one's room, where the child slept peacefully. "What?" "She could have chosen any wealthy family in this city to save her from the streets, but she chose you. She chose to save us. Do you think she saved us?" "I'm sure of it. You were lost after what you thought was my death. And I was lost after waking up and finding out that 3 years of my life had been stolen." Maria turned to face him, but she brought us back to each other. Dr. Robert appeared the next morning with the final adoption papers. With Maria now legally present and mentally competent, the adoption could be finalized. "There's one last formality," he said, spreading the documents on the kitchen table. "You both need to sign as adoptive parents, and she needs to give her formal consent to the adoption." They called the little one, who came running down the stairs in her school uniform, ready for another day of class. "What's this?" she asked, looking at the papers. "These are the documents that make you officially our daughter," Maria explained. "But you need to say if that's what you really want." The little one looked at the two adults who had become her whole world and smiled with that radiant confidence she had learned on the streets, but refined in love. "I do," she said without hesitation. "But can I ask for one thing?" "Of course, honey. Can I keep my grandma's name too, so that she's always part of our family?" The request touched both adults deeply. "Of course you can," the businessman said, his voice choked with emotion. "Then," she said, taking the pen that Dr. Robert offered, "I'm going to sign my full new name." With her tongue sticking out in concentration, she carefully wrote her name, followed by the last names of her adoptive parents, and at the end, the last name of her deceased grandmother. "Done," she announced proudly. "Now I'm officially yours, and you're officially mine." Dr. Robert smiled as he organized the papers. "Well, that makes it official. Congratulations to the new family." But as they celebrated this important milestone, none of them knew that the greatest proof of their strength as a family was yet to come, and that it would be the little one herself who would have to show them the true meaning of the word forever. That afternoon, while they were playing in the garden of the mansion that now really felt like a home, the little one asked a question that none of the adults expected. "Mom Maria, Daddy, do you know why I chose you that day at the warehouse?" "Why, honey?" Maria asked, curious. "Because when I saw Daddy tied to that chair, he wasn't crying or asking the bad men to stop. He was angry, but he wasn't scared." She paused, picking flowers for an improvised bouquet. "And people who aren't afraid to suffer for themselves will never let other people suffer alone." The wisdom contained in those simple words left both adults speechless. This child hadn't just saved their lives. She had seen through all the chaos and danger to find the goodness they didn't even know they possessed. "And now," she continued, handing the bouquet to Maria, "we're a family that will never let anyone suffer alone." It was a promise that would be tested very soon in ways that none of them could imagine. 6 months had passed since the officialization of the adoption, and the family had found a rhythm of life that seemed almost magical in its harmony. The little one flourished at school, becoming known for her kindness to other children who seemed lost or scared. Maria had regained much of her emotional strength through therapy and the unconditional love of her new daughter, and the businessman had rebuilt his company in a more ethical and sustainable way, creating investment funds that benefited families in need. But it was on a Saturday morning, while they were having breakfast in the garden of the mansion, that life surprised them once again. The little one was excitedly telling a story about a school project when she stopped talking mid-sentence, her expression changing to one of confusion and then concern. She got up from her chair and walked to the front gate, as if she had heard something the adults couldn't perceive. "What is it, honey?" Maria asked, following her. "There's someone outside, a little girl who's crying." The businessman and Maria exchanged glances. The mansion's security system hadn't detected anyone, and the guards at the gate hadn't mentioned any visitors. But when they opened the gate, they found exactly what the little one had said. A child of about 3 years old, dirty, poorly dressed, and crying softly while hiding behind a tree on the sidewalk. "Oh my God," Maria whispered. "Where did she come from?" The little one had already approached the smaller child, kneeling down to her level with the same gentleness she had learned from her grandma on the streets. "Hi, little one. Why are you crying?" The smaller child looked at her with big, scared eyes, but didn't respond. She was clearly terrified and malnourished. "She's hungry," the little one observed, recognizing signs she knew all too well. "And scared. Just like I was when I found you." The businessman approached carefully. "Where are your parents, sweetie?" The child just shook her head, indicating that she didn't know or couldn't say. "Can we take her inside and give her some food?" the little one asked. "Please." Maria and the businessman looked at each other again. They had been through so much in recent months that their first reaction was caution. But looking at that clearly abandoned and needy child and seeing the natural compassion of their daughter, they knew they couldn't simply ignore the situation. "Of course we can," Maria said, gently extending her hand to the smaller child. "We'll take care of you." In the following hours, while the smaller child took a bath, with Helena's help, and ate her first proper meal in a long time, the little one remained by her side like a protective little mother. "She doesn't talk yet," Helena observed after spending time with the child, "but she seems to understand everything we say." "Trauma," Maria said immediately, recognizing the signs from her own experience. "She's been through something that made her stop talking." Dr. Robert arrived in the afternoon, after being called to advise them on the necessary legal procedures, but he brought information with him that none of them expected. "The child has a name," he said, consulting some documents. "The authorities have been looking for her for 2 weeks. She disappeared from a municipal orphanage where she was under temporary care." "How did she get here?" the businessman asked. "That's the interesting part. The orphanage is more than 20 miles from here. For a 3-year-old child to walk that distance alone." Dr. Robert shook his head. "It's almost impossible." "Unless someone helped her," Maria suggested. "Or unless she followed some kind of instinct," the little one said, watching the smaller child play quietly with some toys. "On the streets, you learn to sense where there are good people." During dinner, the smaller child finally showed signs of relaxation. She smiled for the first time when the little one made funny faces and even tried to imitate some sounds her protector made. "She likes you," the businessman observed. "She recognizes someone who understands," the little one corrected, with a wisdom that still surprised the adults. "When you've gone hungry, you recognize other people who have gone hungry too." That night, the smaller child refused to sleep alone, so the little one insisted on sharing her bed with her. The businessman and Maria stood watching the 2 children sleeping together, one protecting the other as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You know what this means, don't you?" Maria said softly. "It means our family may be growing again," he replied, already knowing what the answer would be. "Can we adopt her too?" the little one asked the next morning, as if she had read the adult's thoughts. "She doesn't have anyone, and we have too much love for just 3 people." The question was simple, but the implications were enormous. Adopting a second child, especially one with evident trauma, would be a gigantic challenge. But looking at the way their daughter had immediately taken on the role of protective older sister, they knew there was no other choice. "If that's what you want," Maria said, "and if the legal procedures allow it, then yes." The next few months were a sped-up replay of everything they had experienced with the first adoption, but this time with the experience and confidence they had gained. The smaller child, who now had an official name and a family, slowly began to speak again. Her first words were "Mom" and "Daddy," directed at Maria and the businessman, followed by "Sister," when she looked at the little one. The little one took on her role as older sister with seriousness and love, teaching the smaller one all the lessons she had learned about family, security, and unconditional love. She helped her get dressed, eat, and most importantly, trust again. "You know," the little one said one night while the two sisters were playing in the garden, "my grandma always said that angels come disguised as normal people." "What does that mean?" asked the smaller one, her voice still small but increasingly confident. "It means that sometimes, when you need it most, people appear who save you. Like Daddy and Mom Maria saved me, and like now, we saved you." The smaller child smiled and hugged her older sister. "And now we're a family of angels. We're a family that takes care of angels," the little one corrected with affection. A year after the arrival of the second daughter, the family was complete in a way that none of them had imagined possible. The businessman had expanded his business to include a foundation that helped street children, funded by the profits from his ethical investments in stocks and sustainable technologies. Maria had become an advocate for adoptive families and frequently spoke at events about the benefits of adoption. Helena had officially assumed the role of grandmother to the girls and manager of the house. But it was during the 5-year-old little one's birthday that she made the observation that perfectly summarized their extraordinary journey. "Daddy," she said, while cutting the cake surrounded by her family and friends, "do you remember when you found me in that dark place?" "I remember every second," he replied. "And do you remember how I said I knew how to draw birds?" "I remember." "Well, I always drew birds trapped in cages, but now I draw birds flying free." She smiled, looking around the table at each person she loved. "Because I learned that when you have a real family, you don't need cages anymore. You can fly anywhere and always know you have a nest to come back to." The wisdom contained in those simple words deeply touched everyone present. This child, who had begun her life in the most difficult circumstances imaginable, had not only found her own salvation, but had become the salvation of an entire family. Maria held the businessman's hand as they watched their two daughters laugh and play with the other guests. "You know what the most amazing part of this whole story is?" she asked. "What?" "That it started with you being kidnapped and ended with all of us being freed." As the sun set over the mansion that now echoed with children's laughter and the conversations of a united family, the businessman thought about how life had mysterious ways of turning the worst experiences into the greatest blessings. He had lost a sister to greed, but gained 2 daughters through love. He had thought his wife was dead, but she had returned stronger than ever. And he had started as a lonely and lost man, but now he was the father of 2 extraordinary girls who taught him daily about courage, compassion, and the true meaning of family. That night, when the girls finally fell asleep after a day full of celebrations, they snuggled together in the same room, whispering secrets and dreams as real sisters do. "Little sister," the older one said before falling asleep, "do you know what the best thing about having a family is?" "What?" "It's that no matter what happens, we'll never be alone again." And as the moon shone through the window over 2 girls who had found their home, their words echoed through the house as a promise and a truth that would last forever. Somewhere in the city, other children still needed to be saved, other families still needed to be formed, and other stories of love and redemption still needed to be written. But in that yellow house, surrounded by gardens where free birds sang at dawn, a family had found their own version of happily ever after, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, courageous, and built on the strongest foundation of all, the unconditional love that chooses to stay no matter what. The little girl who once wandered alone through the dark streets of sprawling metropolis now slept safely, surrounded by the love of a family she herself had helped build, knowing that there were free birds waiting to sing with her in the morning.